Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today it is time to do the third Scarlet and Violet illustration rare tier list, and that means we are looking at Obsidian Flames. This is a somewhat controversial set, mainly because of the fact this was something really rare to see, which was they basically did a one-for-one Japanese expansion to, well, English TCG. Now I know we saw that with White Flare and Black Bolt, but those are a bit different. This was a mainline set that was just, simply put, not done normally. Part of this is obviously because Paldea Evolved ended up being three separate sets from Japan, and then this one was just one, which led us to having a set with only 18 illustration rares slash special illustration rares. So let's get right into it with the Gloom. Now the Gloom is a pretty solid one. It is a really nice starting point here. This is one of those that I do have a bit of an issue again with the artwork being something that could easily be on a normal card. But the bottom half is really, really nice. A lot of these other ones where it could easily just be the top half are not nearly this nice. The two wheel on the bottom right are a really nice touch to this one, just making it seem more lively. Having all the random plants and everything around is a really good one. I think this is a pretty solid artwork that deserves to be in the B tier. I think it's a pretty solid one. It's not the greatest out there. I do still have a bit of an issue with how it can easily be just cut off and cropped like here to here, and it'll look still really solid as a regular card. But I think B tier solid. Ninetales. This is a pretty obvious one. This is one that when people saw it, they were initially insanely hyped for, and even now we're still obviously really loving that card. It was a great card, just a matter of this set had really, I've seen a lot of people say this set had bad pull rates. That's just not true. I remember opening this and it was so easy to pull anything pretty much. In fact, special illustration rares were flying out of this. It was really illustration rares that are a bit harder. Even then, this is an S tier. It's a great one. It's one of the few cards where the hype ended up living it was actually, justified. It was a beautiful card, a really, really good regular illustration rare. I don't think it's a high S tier card like a lot of other people do, but I think it's definitely S tier. Now the Palafin. This is a really solid one. I think this is one that definitely gets forgotten a bit, but Palafin, really solid one here. The symmetrical artwork, aside from the little part of the wave bubbles, are the only thing that really aren't symmetrical. But the overall flowers, the coral, the waves, the Palafin, and the Finizen, symmetry is always something that looks really good in the eye, and this is one of those. It is a beautiful looking artwork. Having the two Finizen, especially in the bottom right and bottom left of Palafin, actually being symmetrical despite going the opposite direction, is a really, really nice touch. Definitely a solid card right here. I think this is a solid one for the A tier. I don't think it's as good as the Ninetales, but I do think it's significantly better than Bellibolt. So it gets there. Now we have the Bellibolt. Now this is the first one that is a weak one. This is a pretty damn weak one. The fact is we also have another Bellibolt that came out during together, which was significantly better than this one. This one where just him plopped in the middle of a cave with, or a forest with some water in front. It gets the idea of what the Bellibolt does, but it's not like this is being done with other, Pokemon around using the light. It's just him being there. Honestly, I think this is a super weak artwork. I think this is an F. I really do not like this one. I think it is significantly just too little going on. It's not even as simple as good. Because there's so much you could do with this, having something shine in the water. Could you imagine how much better this would be if you were, you shine in the water and you could see, the silhouette of even just a Magikarp or something like that? Instead, no, it's just shining a light. That doesn't make a ton of sense, really. It's just not a good one, definitely a weak one. Now the Cleffa. The Cleffa is another one of those I think a lot of people also saw initially and were like, okay, this is a pretty cool one. Also because this was a card that initially was pretty playable, because this ended up being one that, ended up being used in decent amount of decks before. This is like the Badoo, in a way, before Badoo, where everybody just started spamming it. But this is a pretty solid one in the play when it comes to playing the game, but overall this is a really nice one as well. Again, it may be a bit simple just having the Cleffa there, but it actually looks really nice. Again, it has that beautiful sense of, what am I actually standing on, right? We've talked about this before with the Chi-Yu, where it's you can't really tell exactly what Cleffa is standing on. You would imagine that it's sand, but it also looks kind of like water. And so it ends up having this really, really cool look. And to where even though it's a more simple one, I do think it's a solid one and goes to the A tier. I don't think it's an S tier. I think that a lot of people might think it's an S tier. I don't. It's still a solid one, deserves the A tier. It's a really nice looking card, and definitely deserves to be up there. Now Larvitar. This is one that I kind of forgot was on this one. And then this is one where, again, it uses the Pokédex part of the bottom right. This Pokemon becomes a pupa after eating enough dirt to make a mountain. And as you can see, it is currently eating dirt, so it makes sense. The only issue is, like we talked about with other ones, sometimes it doesn't really, translate well to an illustration. This one definitely doesn't. It looks really awkward because if you're somebody who's like watched the anime, this doesn't look exactly like it. It looks somewhat similar to food. Obviously, this could look like something else, obviously. So it doesn't really look all that great. It doesn't make a ton of sense for these mounds to be built up the way they are. It's not the worst artwork, but I think it's a D tier. I don't think it's like the Belly Bolt, which is just so uninspired. But this one is definitely a weak one. I think it deserves a D tier. Now, Houndour. This is one that I completely forgot existed, but this is actually still a nice one. Having the berries all around, having them be in this like trash looking thing, it's really cool. Again, uses the Pokédex part, but better, about hunting in packs. Actually works pretty solid here, but I don't think it's an insane artwork. I think them being around the berries, it's still solid. I'm going to put it in the C tier. I could maybe put it in B, but it's like, this is not as good as the Gloom, so I'm going to keep it at C tier. Now we have the Scizor. This is a really nice one. Having the like dueling looking scissors is a really cool piece right there. And again, this looks like an illustration, like it was a painting and artwork, which is really, really nice. Usually those are ones that always get at least a tier higher from me. I think this is a really underappreciated one. I think a lot of people forget about this card. I'm going to have to put this one probably in A tier. I think it's a really, really solid artwork, a really, really cool looking card. I think it definitely deserves that A tier. Now we have the Varoom. Now the Varoom, I was never a huge fan of this Pokemon or Revavroom, especially considering the fact that you ended up facing one every single time in the games once you were doing the Team Star stuff. But in terms of this artwork, it makes sense. You have this, car engine with the Varooms helping out making it. So it does make sense there. It is pretty cool like that. But, I don't know. It just, something about it to me, it's not a insane one where it's like, I don't think this is an incredible artwork. I think it's just kind of they, picked a old-looking Pokemon, like basically like what would an old-looking car look like in the Pokemon world, and just threw a Varoom on it. I think that this is a C tier. I think it's a solid one, but not great. Now the Pidgey. This one I really love. This is the first time pretty much, I think, in all of these evolution lines where the first one is the clear-cut best of all of them. Usually, the first one is the weak one, right? Like we've seen with the Baxcalibur line, the Gardevoir line. We've usually seen the first one be the weakest, or it's the second to weakest. This is easily the strongest. It is such a cool design. Again, the root numbers, which end up doing for all three of these, is cool, but having all of them just poking their heads up, I think this is a super iconic card. I do think this is an S tier one. I think it is a really, really fun-looking card, and this is one I definitely love having. This is a really cool one. Now the Pidgeotto. This is the weakest of the three, by far. Again, the root, where, it makes sense. You're continuing that, which makes the story. But when you compare this one to the Pidgey, the illustration choice isn't as good because of the fact that you're making this more into like a normal-looking thing, but you still have the really rigid design. It's still a nice one. It's just when you compare it to the Pidgey, like when you compare these two, it's no comparison that this one is better than this one. This is still solid. I do think it's better than both of these, so I'm going to put it in B tier. I don't think it's as good as any of these three, so I'm going to put it there. Now, the last illustration rare, yeah, I know, wow, this is the last one, is the Lechonk. Another one I think a lot of people really loved, and it is a solid one. Again, just the Lechonk eating a ton of stuff and then just lying down. It's a really, really fun one. It's a really nice one. I'm going to put this in A tier. It's simple. It's sweet. It makes a lot of sense. Definitely deserves that high. Now we have the first of the very few special illustration rares, and that is going to be Ice-Cube. Now, this is, of course, where they started the Terra stuff. So this is a Terra Fire. So it makes sense why they're having this. And in terms of the Terra design, this is one of the ones that was definitely done better. Even in the future, a lot of the Terra Pokemon that were actual different types weren't always done in the most, like, oh, it makes sense what they look like. This does, but it still is a really basic-looking SIR. Remember, SIRs, in theory, are supposed to be even, more intricate, dynamic artwork than the regular ones. And for an SIR, this has to be D tier. Because they at least make the hat work in this one, which they usually don't, I gotta put it above F. But it's a super basic and boring overall image, so it gets a D tier. Now the Charizard. I honestly never got the hate for this card. I understand that the Terra stuff wasn't the most liked stuff in terms of the design, because it's just a random hat. But it honestly looks really nice in this card. The hat not itself, but because of what you have around Charizard, we have that similar dark looking crystal stuff around, and even Charizard being crystallized, it actually looks really solid. I think that the thing is, this set really started basically the death of Charizard being the quote-unquote poster child for the TCG, and it ended up being Umbreon. Despite the fact that this is a better artwork than the Sunbreon, I'm going to be honest. And it's not even talking about the Paldean Fates one. I think this is a really solid one. I think for Charizard stuff, this is one that's very underappreciated. It's just a matter that this set was really easy to pull this card. I pulled at least 2 copies. But I do think it's a great Charizard artwork. In fact, when you're talking about recent ones, I think it's one of the best. I honestly do think this is an S tier one. It is super dynamic. When you're looking at it from afar, you can immediately tell it's a Charizard silhouette without even realizing it has a hat on. Then you get close, the whole border, it's a beautiful artwork, deserves S tier. Now we have Revavroom. Not a fan of this one again. This is a weak one. It's the Battle Bus stuff. It's supposed to be like the cards they ended up using in the Team Star stuff. So in that sense, I do get it. But for an illustration, this comes across as another more basic one. I think this, for a similar reason, is a D tier. I love the call to the game, but sometimes, using a callback isn't going to be the best thing in the world, so I'm putting it in D tier. Now, the last Pokemon Special Illustration Rare is going to be Pidgeotto X. Now, this one I do like better than the Pidgeotto, because of the fact that it's not super closed in, where you have all the details right up front, and then having it be this boxed out look looks kind of weird. Because you have the skyline in the background, it works pretty well here, the water and all the paths and all that. Again, it's nowhere near as good as the Pidgey, but I do think it's a bit better than the Pidgeotto, so I'm going to put it in A tier. Now we have the 2 Trainer Special Illustration Rares, starting with Gita. Gita, of course, the weakest champion in the history of the franchise. This was one that, it's just solid artwork, honestly. I just don't look at it and be like it's insane, but for what it is, a trainer one, I think this is a B tier. It's a really solid artwork. It makes a lot of sense that it's a simple one that works in this case, just B tier. Then last is Poppy, the little Elite Four member riding on the Camparaja. Looks really nice here. Bottom line is, though, I do think this is definitely the weaker of the 2. It is not as good as the Gita, so I'm going to put this at C tier. And overall, for the Obsidian Flames tier list, I gotta be honest, illustration rare-wise, this was clearly the overall best one. You really only had 2 truly weak illustration, not special, but regular illustration rares. You had 2 weak ones and 2 mediocre ones. And you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that were B tier or higher. In terms of consistency, the best so far. When it comes to special illustration rares, pretty weak. Once you get past the Charizard and the Pidgeot, it's, an above average one that's solid in the Gita, and then some pretty weak ones, especially the 2 in D tier. But overall, that'll be my thoughts on this one. Again, this is probably going to be the shortest of all these. I think maybe Shroud of Fate might be shorter, even though I think that set has more, actually. But again, let me know down below what you think about my tier list and what your personal picks would be for this one, especially the Charizard. I want to know what you guys think about the Charizard. I think this is one that got a lot of hate initially for no real reason. Having seen it in person, having had copies of this, it is such a nice card, honestly. I think it's definitely underappreciated. I'm probably going to try and get a Japanese copy at some point. But again, make sure you subscribe to the channel with the bell turned on if you enjoyed this video. Also, like the video so you're notified when I upload any videos. As you can tell, at this point, I'm uploading 1 card video every week, and then, of course, the 2 parts of the Pokemon Shield playthrough. So make sure you're around for those, and as always, guys, have a great night.